Hi, everyone. Welcome in. We're going to give it just a minute to let folks join before we get started. Welcome, welcome. We'll just give it another few seconds to let any last folks come in. But as a reminder, this is being recorded, so we'll get started, and even if you missed a little bit, we'll be good. All right. Hello, my name is Megan Powell. I'm the Associate Director of the Global Scholars Program here on the Oakland campus. I'm very excited that you all are joining us today to talk all things F1 visas. Looks like some folks have already figured out that we're asking questions in the chat, which is great, in the Q&A, excuse me. So please, as the session's going on, if you have any questions, myself and some teammates will be behind the scenes answering questions. So please drop any questions there, and yeah, I'll move ahead and get started to introduce our teammates here. So we'll have Jiskar Dimash presenting, and Miranda Rains will be with me in the Q&A answering questions. All right, so I'll turn it over to you, Jiskar.
Thank you for the warm welcome, and happy to have everybody here today. We're going to definitely go into a lot of detail about many things related to the F1 visa, but we want to highlight, of course, our office and what we do. I am from the Office of Global Services, which is at Northeastern. We are the international student office on campus here. We handle many things in terms of pre-arrival, students who are on site, in terms of compliance, employment, and many things in between. So as you can see on the slide here, we have many things that we cover in terms of students who are considering different statuses, in terms of travel, anything you could possibly think of in terms of your academic journey will have likely some kind of immigration impact as well. And we want to make sure that you're highly aware of what that means when that comes time. So we're going to highlight that today. So for the first slide here, I really just want to cover what we're going to talk about today and who this audience should be. So firstly, as you mentioned, know from the title of webinar and from our slides here, this really is for students who want to learn about the F1 visa process, what that means in detail, and learning about the timelines, how to apply, things like that. As mentioned by Megan, we will have and be able to answer questions in the Q&A, so please use that when applicable, when you have a question for us. But in terms of who this session is for, it's really for students who want to change or apply for an F1 status. If you are a student already who has permanent residency or another visa type that allows you to study in the US, this is not a session that you need to attend. It's not really for you unless you intend to switch to F1 status after you have their current status already. So just keep that in mind. That's kind of the flow of what we're going to be expecting to go for today. I do have a lot to cover, and I will be covering many of the slide information, but the slides will be provided to you after the presentation. So many things that I won't speak to directly will be accessible on your own when you are able to read the slides. And with that in mind, we also have many resources on our website of how to answer and how to find information when we're not, of course, available. You can find it on our website, which is international.northeastern.edu/OGS. You can find information about how to apply for documents like an I-20, and we'll talk about what that means, applying for the F1 visa itself, prepping for that process, and ultimately entering the US on that status. So all these will be covered in this presentation, but we have resources for you when you are able to do so as well. So with that, I want to start with kind of an overview of what to expect for the process from beginning to end in terms of basically getting approved and accepted to the program, paying the fee for the admissions, and then going forward up until arrival. Ultimately speaking, the process will begin and have information about applying for a document called the Form I-20, which we'll talk about that later, and applying and receiving that document, paying the relevant CVIS fees associated with that goes to the government directly, going through the visa interview process and what that means and what are some things you should keep in mind when you're going through that process, receiving the visa itself, planning a travel to the US, and of course, arriving here in the US. This process varies depending on what location you're applying from. So keep that in mind. I mentioned that probably a few more times as I continue on in the presentation. But processes will take some time. So we advocate, of course, to apply for anything as soon as possible. And this might take upwards of a couple of months, depending on the embassy's timelines as well. So we recommend you to apply as soon as possible to make sure things are in your favor for your planning. So the first thing I want to highlight, of course, is the F1 visa itself. What is the F1 visa? What does this mean? Ultimately, this is a document that you would need to have for any international student to be able to study in the US in a full-time capacity. So this will be the document that we heavily use for students who are intending to study in the US. And there's many benefits that are tied to an F1 status, primarily related to employment later down the line. If you're thinking about employment either on campus or off campus, doing an internship or doing a co-op, these are all factors that need authorization to be able to do. And the F1 visa does allow this to happen. So we definitely strive to make sure that students are aware of what this means and how to get these benefits when this time comes. But this is kind of the overarching piece of the F1 visa itself. We'll go into more details about the F1 visa in a little bit as well too, but this is kind of the overview as to what to expect, what the F1 visa basically is. The next big document that we're going to talk about is the I-20. This ultimately is a document of eligibility from the university stating that you, the student, are eligible to study at Northeastern, and it classifies very specific information about who you are, what you're studying, the length of time you're studying for, how you're covering the fees and the payment for the program. All these are detailed very clearly on the I-20. And this is an important document needed actually to go to the visa interview with, because you have to showcase that the school has vetted that you are authorized to study and they've issued you an I-20 that you can use that document for the visa interview itself. We always recommend that you should have this document or copies of it, especially with you if you are traveling, and down the line, you will likely have multiple I-20s. That's perfectly fine. But always keep copies of those I-20s with you because you may need them for future benefits or future applications while you are studying with us in the future. So please keep that in mind. It's very important. So one thing I do want to highlight is for anyone who is a transfer student, you may already be in the US right now and have an F1 status. It may be eligible for you to actually continue using your current status now and being able to transfer that record over to Northeastern. There are some factors involved in terms of the timing of when and what can be done to make that happen. Primarily, if you are actively on the status right now, and depending on when you finished your last program, either if that was completing studies in high school or completing your studies at a university in the US, these are two situations where you may be able to transfer your record over to Northeastern. So please keep that in mind, the timing of when that happens, and primarily if you're actively on that status now is very important. However, if you are in the situation where you have completed your studies at a previous location and you are intending to transfer over, if you're able to transfer everything smoothly with your current school, you actually are able to remain in the US during the time of your transfer pending window. So don't feel pressured if you feel like, my school has ended in May and I don't know if I can stay in the country or not during this time. As long as you were able to be transferred by your current school and they're able to do that action for you, you can remain in the US until the new program starts in the fall. Okay, so beginning the process about requesting your I-20. This is, as I mentioned, a very important document that you would need to have. The process really begins everything, ultimately speaking. Once you have the access to go into your portal, we have documentation in the app status check, ultimately on how to apply for the I-20 directly. We have an OGS welcome that is in there. So if you haven't seen it yet, please, I urge you to check that out when you can to see the actual links on how to access the I-20 form directly. But one thing I do want to highlight is the processing time for this application. Due to us being in a peak window right now for applications for the fall, we do anticipate that it could take up to 15 or 20 business days for processing. This is something that on the extreme end may happen, but we likely will process them sooner than that timeline. But keep that in mind when you submit your application, that this is the window that we advertise for the upper end of the processing cycle. So once again, if you are considering applying for things early, I recommend you do so we can make sure we cover all the information and process your application on time so that this can be handled as quickly as possible. After you submit your application for the I-20, we do our review, we verify everything is valid and accurate. We will then be going forward to issue you this new document for the I-20 for you. In this process, you receive two separate emails from us, one with the I-20 itself, but it is password protected, and second email showcasing that password to access that document afterwards. We always recommend for everyone to verify that everything is up to date and accurate on your I-20. We use our best knowledge and judgment to make sure it is up to date and accurate, but you know yourselves best, right? If you see something is wrong or something is off in terms of your name and how you report your name based off of your passport or anything that you identify as accurate, I want to make sure that that we should get that feedback saying something's off. Please make sure you make this edit. That's really where we emphasize that piece. One thing I do want to highlight on your I-20, because it is very specific to your program, we actually showcase two things here at the bottom. As you can see in the picture here, the I-20 really cannot showcase both non-degree and degree timelines on the same document. So when you receive your new I-20, it would specifically only be for the Global Scholars Program duration, as well as the program information. So you will see information similar to the picture here, where it highlights your educational level as non-degree. It would say Major 1, which really is kind of the field of study that your program fits under. Major 1 will always be general studies. This is for the Global Scholars Program specifically. And Major 2, which is the field of study that your actual program should fall under. So these are factors that you may see when you get your I-20, and you may have questions about and doubts about, is this accurate or not? This is the flow of what you should be seeing. Likewise, the program start and end date will only be for a 8-month duration, going from ultimately fall, September of 2024, and ending in May of 2025. So make sure those dates are accurate, but that's what you will see when you receive your I-20. There will be a future time when you'd have to apply for a I-20 update when you complete your program to receive an I-20 that is a multi-year I-20 for the rest of your undergraduate program. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to bring this up actually a little bit later in terms of the visa discussion, but this is important information to know when you're thinking about how your I-20 will be issued for you. All right, after the I-20 has been issued, the next step is paying the fees that are tied to the government applications itself. There's one immediate fee called the I-901 CVIS fee, and this is ultimately captured to make sure that you're eligible to use this document for any benefits into the future for the I-20 itself. So there is a fee of $350 as of right now, and this fee must be paid prior to attending your visa appointment and entering the US. This is something that will be checked at the embassy or consulate, most likely, but certainly prior to your arrival in the US. So we always recommend that you have this paid prior to your actual interview itself so that you have the most support of your application and a strong claim that you're willing and ready to continue your process for the visa itself. Some information on your I-20 will be needed to pay this fee. It's called the CVIS ID, and this is an ID that identifies specifically who you are as a student tied to your current profile with our systems. This number won't change as long as you are maintaining your status. So even if you are, say, a transfer student who transferred into Northeastern, this number will still stay the same. Likewise, if you are finishing your global scholars program and going into your degree program afterwards, this also will still stay the same. As long as you're actively making continuous progress in your program and doing it in a timely fashion, that number won't change whatsoever. So just keep that in mind when you're applying for any kind of future benefit as well. But for your interview, you definitely want to have a copy of the receipt of this payment, so you can have proof of that documentation. If you go to their website, fmjfee.com, that's where everything does begin for that process. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about, after you have your I-20, what do I do next? You would go to that website to begin that process. Okay, so after that, you have your I-20 in hand, you have your CVIS ID, you put that into information for the I-901 CVIS fee. Now you want to start the big process of applying for the visa itself. And firstly, how do you apply for a visa? Ultimately speaking, you're able to go to a US embassy or consulate to begin this process. I do want to highlight that this has to be an embassy or consulate that is outside of the US. So if you're able to be in the US, if you're on another status, that's perfectly fine to enter the country potentially on that status, but you cannot apply for an F1 visa while being inside the US. So please keep this in mind. To find where you could find an embassy or a consulate that can do this process, you can go to the usembassy.gov website, and from there it will dictate the information as to the location that you wish to apply from. Most students would apply from their home country, and that's perfectly fine to do so, excuse me. But ultimately, you are not only restricted to apply from your home country. Many times, especially if you are traveling during the summer or have other plans to be elsewhere, you are able to apply for a US visa from a different country. We call this a third country national application. And this is perfectly fine to do so, but we want to recommend that you look into that process because sometimes that does require other documentation to apply, such as maybe a tourist visa to enter that country specifically, or other documentation needed for their specific application. So we always recommend for you to look into a little bit deeper what that means, how that looks like in terms of the process itself, and any other documents you may need to submit for that application. But one thing I do want to highlight, and this is very important because this is so specific to every location, is the visa appointment wait times themselves. Every location has their own timelines based off of their own internal clock, their processing time, the time of year it is at right now for processing, as well as even country of origin from the applicant themselves. So a lot of factors do come into play when it comes into applying for a visa. So I always recommend looking at the travel.state.gov website. They actually have a estimated wait times page that covers every embassy or consulate in the world and their timelines for what you should anticipate waiting for. And you can see very clearly that since it's an estimate, it is real time. So this number does change. Maybe if you check next week, it might be a different number than it is today, as an example. So make sure you are checking there to be very clear for your planning. If an embassy that is close to you has a 3-month wait window, that may not be the best option to pursue. However, if one close, maybe a little bit further out than you, has a closer option for a faster processing time for an appointment itself, this may be working in your favor. So definitely keep that in mind when you're looking at planning. It's very important to make sure you want to have that happen so you can plan the best accordingly. And one last thing I want to highlight before we go into the application process is there are ways to apply and get more information specifically on the website of the embassy directly. So I think that'll be incredibly helpful if there is restrictions or if there are delays in visa processing or visa applications in general, you're able to see that from the website, usembassy.gov. So definitely check that out once more to verify that information. But on this slide here, this is kind of the beginning of that process now. When you have all your documentation, you know where you're going to go. How do you begin this process, right? There is a document online called the DS-160. This is the visa application, the visa application itself, where you begin the process to choose your embassy location, choose the date and time, hopefully, of where your appointment will be, and paying the relevant fees tied to that application itself. There is a $185 fee that they do charge for this application to be filed, so keep that in mind as well too. But one thing I do want to super stress, and going back to your I-20 that we talked about a few slides ago, is your information on this application should mirror what you receive from the university. So please keep that in mind. Our documentation is very specific in terms of, on our end, for the Global Scholars Program, the program length, the program duration, all of that is factored in on our I-20, correct? But when you're applying, you want to make sure you're using that same information so that there is as little possible of a chance for confusion on their end. If you're submitting documentation that only has, say, for instance, 8 months of an I-20 duration, but your documentation on the application says you're applying for a 5-year program, as an example, that could be confusing to the embassies when they're looking at your documentation. So just keep that in mind for sure when you're applying for any kind of benefit or any kind of application tied to your international status with the Global Scholars Program, that you're using information that's also consistent with the Global Scholars Program and the documentation that's also given from us directly. There might be some questions specifically also about information about the US address or US contact. Everything from that information should be flagged on your I-20 in terms of the address, for instance, of the campus or a contact that you have. You can use our information. You will see very clearly who authorized and issued your I-20 on the I-20 itself, and you can use that person's information if asked for this document. So that's something you can definitely use if that does come to light. Okay, so talking about the embassy and making an appointment, we talked about the first step. After you file, as I mentioned, you're able to choose the date and time based off of their profile. Every embassy is different, so you may not be able to choose the specific criteria, but this is generally how it should function for most embassies across the world for choosing that option based off of their availability. There is a way, potentially, to apply for an expedited request for an appointment if your program is starting within 2 months of your program start date, which would be on in September, or if you can't secure a appointment itself prior to the start of your program. This is seen as and reviewed out on a discretionary basis. So they have the right to deny the request, of course, if you do request for an expedited application. So we definitely always stress the point that you can apply as early as possible to make sure you have a higher chance to get an earlier appointment, and hopefully they can process things in a smooth manner. But there is this extra layer of support if there are wait times that are well beyond what is seen as helpful for your timeline, if you can't arrive potentially for the start of the term. So just keep that in mind as another option that may help you in your process when you're thinking about moving forward with the visa application itself. Likewise, there is and may be an option, depending on your status previously and your situation, to waive the interview itself. This is very specific to very specific populations. I won't go into it too deeply here because every embassy has their own criteria as to how this is done. And once again, is also discretionary in nature, but there may be a chance if you are able to waive the interview itself for specific demographic or specific locations based off of the criteria that each embassy uses. So you may have that as a nice surprise if that does end up happening for you. All right, so one thing I want to highlight about the embassy and the visa interview itself, first and foremost, is that it is not a document-driven process. I think that's a big misconception that I want to make sure everyone is very clear on. Bringing many documents with you outside of the required documents that we'll talk about soon isn't really going to help the case too much. It's really a discussion between you and the visa official in terms of your understanding of the knowledge of what an F-1 visa does and your timeline in the US. These are all factors that are very important to know ahead of time. So bringing multiple documentation, asking or having support letters for your visa, this really won't help your case for the visa appointment itself, because it is a discussion between you and the embassy official to verify that they can confidently approve you for this benefit because they acknowledge that you understand the limits of the F1 visa directly. So please keep that in mind. That's something that will help you when you plan out your strategy for thinking about the discussion with the embassy official directly. In terms of documents, though, there are some things that we do recommend you bring just to make sure you have the required documents that they do expect to see or they will need to process your visa directly. A few of them we mentioned already in terms of the DS-160, the application for the visa itself. Having a confirmation page saying that you have filed for an application with them is the first thing you want to showcase as proof of having that step done. Having the other fee I mentioned as well, the fee payment, any documentation for fees that you have paid, you do want a copy of that when you are bringing yourself to the interview so that they can see that all relevant fees have been paid well in advance. Of course, you want to bring the I-20 that we have issued at Northeastern to showcase that you are eligible to receive a visa from them, and they can very clearly clarify exactly how they will issue your visa based off of the documentation that you're providing to them, sometimes helpful with our I-20, of course. Beyond that, you want to have a valid passport and one that is valid for at least 6 months into the future from your time of arrival into the US. So please keep that in mind. That 6-month valid time is actually very important, not just for the embassy official directly, but when you're entering the country, you also will need to showcase your passport. And if it is a situation where your passport is under 6 months, they do have the right to deny you entry into the US. So please plan ahead, plan accordingly. Even if it is valid, it doesn't mean it is still eligible for use. So double check your passport, make sure it is valid for at least 6 months into the future from the timeline when you plan to enter the US. From there, you want to, of course, have documentation for your evidence of financial support, proving that you're able to attend the school and also pay for the program. They do require only seeing up to 1 year's worth of funding, and that's also what we require on our I-20 as well, up to 1 year's worth of funding for the program. So when you apply for the I-20, that will be what you need to submit to get that process going underway. The payment we talked about the fee. We talked about the fee, the CVIS fee payment online earlier. The I-901 fee payment. So make sure you have that available as well with you. You want to bring a copy of your offer letter. It's very clear on your offer letter. It showcases both information about your Global Scholars Program in terms of length, in terms of locations, and in terms of intention after you complete your program and going into your program afterward for fall 2025. So that will definitely help a lot of the confusion, if there is any, from the embassy to know your plan in terms of moving forward, in terms of capturing your timeline and knowing how to read your I-20. These are all things that will help aid your case when you're applying for that visa. And lastly, of course, you do need a photo that they will use on your visa directly. There are specific requirements that you will see as you're applying for the application itself. So just keep that in mind. You will need a passport or photo copy that is used for your visa once it has been approved. Second here. Okay, so going from there, the visa interview itself, what's going to happen, what to expect, how this is going to shake down. Really, the process is not as long as many may expect it to be. It actually is a fairly short process where you're talking to the embassy official fairly shortly, maybe even for a few minutes, in terms of what's going on. They are highly trained to gather understanding from what you're saying, to understand how to extrapolate what you're also not saying. So I think it's very important to be very clear, especially if they're asking you questions about your studies, about your university choice, about how you plan to pay for your program, anything beyond your program itself for employment or things beyond that, or anything that they want to come up with. It's kind of fair game in terms of what they determine is appropriate for better understanding your intentions beyond your documentation that you have. So we have a few things here to make sure to clarify on what you should be prepared to speak about on the next couple of slides. But on this slide here, we talk about, of course, making sure they want to make sure that you meet the ESL requirement needed to study in this program. This is something that we do document on the I-20 saying you have met that requirement. but they also want to make sure on their own terms that they are clarifying and confirming this as well. And they also want to verify and understand more about your intent as to why you want to study in the US and why you want to study at Northeastern. So those could come up as questions in this process. Because the F1 visa is a non-immigrant visa, ultimately speaking, they also want to make sure that you do have ties to your home country. And there are ways to showcase that, talking about relatives who are back home, talking about job opportunities or jobs you maybe have had, schooling, property owned, anything to kind of strengthen that tie that you understand that the F1 visa is a non-immigrant temporary visa that you're allowed to study on for a length of time, but the ultimate goal is still to show strength that you're not abandoning your country, as an example. So that's one thing that we want to make sure that it's clear. One thing that I did mention earlier, but I want to stress again, because in my perspective and what I've seen, this probably is the number one concern in terms of visa embassy officials is showcasing your timeline appropriately. If you are in a situation where they ask you about this, you want to be very clear about your program timelines and program goals to avoid any confusion. And it's perfectly fine to talk about your path is going through the Global Scholars Program for one entire year, then matriculating into your program for your degree seeking studies afterwards for multi-years after that. I think that's something that is totally fine to say. And we have documentation on our I-20 that specifies that specifically as well. Like I said earlier, many times folks are asking students, and if someone is saying, yes, I'm here for a bachelor's program, I'm studying for 5 years, this is my goal, and they look at your I-20 and it says 8 months, that is a big discrepancy, and they could have issues with that. So we want to make sure for the highest chance of success that you're very clearly articulating that information if it is asked, so that there's no doubt about that whatsoever when it does come to light. But always, and ending here, really, you definitely want to just be yourself and be honest, answer questions clearly and concisely. You do only have a finite amount of time with them specifically in the interview itself, and answering things that are not asked without answering the actual asked question could be frowned upon potentially on the review of your application, because it is such a short window of time that you have with them. So you want to make sure everything you're saying does count. So a few examples of what will likely come up in the visa interview process itself for questions are, one, what is your purpose for going to the US? Why do you want to study in the US? Have you been to the US before? Why did you choose Northeastern as your school for studying in the US? Who will support you financially while you are inside of the US? What do your parents do? And what are your plans ultimately for your plans after you complete your program? What are your plans after that? So these are kind of general questions that may come up, and based off your answer, then we have stemming some other questions that are tied to what your answers are, related to your F1 status, related to your program, related to your studies, related to your intentions. So you want to make sure that you're prepared for what could come. But of course, these questions are sample questions that were likely to be asked, but are not guaranteed to be asked. So definitely it will be helpful to have an understanding of what their framework is coming from. Instead of memorizing these questions and answering verbatim, you want to make sure that you have an understanding of what they're looking for, so that you have a higher chance of success for getting that actually approved on the tail end. So after the interview has happened, a few things could happen in terms of outcomes. Number one, and most likely, is we would hope that you are approved for your F1 visa. And this really means that they understood what you were saying, they were confident in your understanding of the F1 visa and your timeline and expectations of what you should be doing, and they may approve you on the same day or even at the same location when you're there, or it might be approved after the fact. Maybe they have to go through a separate process to have you approved. Every embassy is different. So just keep that in mind. That is how that process will work. When you are approved, though, they will at some point, either when you're there or before or after, will need your passport to add the visa stamp to your documentation. This really showcases that you have the F1 visa and showcasing the timeline for when that is actually valid. So that's very important. What may happen potentially, they may give you a document called the 221G, and this is not a hard refusal potentially, but really they want more information from you to make sure that they understand your intent and understand other factors that may have given them doubt when they were speaking to you during the embassy official conversation itself. If they don't give you anything specifically, it's okay to request one as well. I think that's helpful to have written documentation as to what they are asking of you instead of just verbal confirmation. I think having written documentation will have a good, stronger trail, improving what you may need later. And that's something that I would recommend to ask for the 221G specifically, if they are able to do so, if that does happen. In rarer situations, they may have an outcome for you, something called administrative processing, where they ultimately want to do a deeper check into your application, your candidacy, your university, any factor that they deem they want more information about. They have the right to do something and look deeper into that beyond the interview process itself. So ultimately speaking, this may happen where they're going to put you in admin processing, and this processing time may take several weeks or even longer for it to be approved on their end if they do approve it. So if this does happen, you want to make sure that you will likely receive documentation at that point, clarifying what they are asking for. So if that does happen, we'll talk about that later in terms of what you should be doing with that documentation on the next slide, I believe. The worst case scenario and the most unlikely would be a hard refusal of your application directly. And this may be for a variety of reasons, but likely it could be tied to maybe a misfiling of documentation or a incorrect application issue in terms of its submission itself. These are usually factors that are required to be done and that have been done incorrectly. Those are the first steps that may happen. Of course, there could be other factors that they determine are reasons for denial. Usually they will tell you what these denial reasons are, and based off that, you are able to reapply potentially for that F1 visa. So that's something that you would want to look at very carefully and closely if that does happen for you, so that you can be very clear as to how to move forward. Of course, with all that said, if there is any kind of delays or any kind of issues with your application itself, please let us know so we can know how to assist what's happening. I'm highlighting two situations here specifically on the slide here in terms of what we want to be aware of. Number one, if you go through the process for the visa itself, they do ask you for more information or place you in admin processing, and they're asking for documentation from the school. There are ways for us to work with you and the school and whatever they're asking for to make sure that we can address their concerns. So sometimes it's asking more information about the program or about the major itself or about the faculty. There's many factors that they may want to know more about. So ultimately speaking, it's really individualized, and we would ask you to showcase that information to us, and we can verify and look deeper to clear up what the issue could be. And then from there, move on to help you with that documentation afterwards. Of course, in the situation where you do not believe you can arrive on time in the program as well, if you have significant visa issues and you think that you are not able to get a visa in time, let us know as well so we can make sure that we can do what we can to support you and support a healthy arrival for the program as well. But keep in mind that we are not part of the embassy or consulate process. We can't expedite anything on their end. We can't issue you a visa on our side, and we can't force them to approve an application for admin processing. All these things that we can support you for is based off of what we see from the documentation that they're issuing you. So we want to make sure we're talking to you, verifying what your understanding of that process was, what the documentation is saying, so we can move forward to hopefully make that process be approved afterwards. But we're not the ones who issue those documents, so we can't approve them or expedite them in any way, shape, or form. Okay, so from that point, afterward, you should hopefully receive the F1 visa itself. And there's some things here that I do want to highlight on the F1 visa to make sure that it's very clear about what to expect. Number one is this document does have a section called entries, and this really means how many times you're able to enter the country, the US, on the specific visa itself. Sometimes it would have S, or it may even have a number on it, and this means you're able to enter the country on a specific single entry if it's S, or the number showcased on the visa itself. But more commonly, much more commonly, I would even say, it would be M, which means multiple, which means you have a unrestricted amount of times you're able to enter the country on this visa specifically. Of course, we want to make sure if you are traveling a lot that you talk to your program about this to make sure that it's not conflicting with your studies. But on the immigration side of things, the M means multiple and will not restrict you from traveling when that is happening for your visa itself. Likewise, the visa primarily is an entry document into the US. I always say it ultimately is like a key to an apartment or a home. You need it for entry into your home, but once you're home, you can leave it whenever you want. You don't need to have it with you at all times at that point. And same thing with the visa itself. The visa must be valid for your entry into the country, but if you are in the country and it does expire into the future, that is perfectly okay for that to happen. But the caveat is as long as your I-20 is up to date and active. So that's something that we'll highlight more, especially when you're here on the ground during your orientation. But your I-20 is the most important document when you're inside the US because that's what captures and keeps your status active. If you are in a case where you are traveling with an expired visa, though, you would need to have a new visa to come back into the US. So please keep that in mind when you're traveling. Always, always, always look at your visa documentation, look at when it expires, and plan accordingly to make sure you have enough time to potentially apply for a renewal visa if that does happen to be the case. Many times visas are issued for a wide variety of times. It could be something as short as 1 year if they determine based off the interview that 1 year is sufficient. More than likely, based off your documentation, it will be much more than that, maybe 5 years or 10, depending on their own situation and their own criteria for approval. But in your case, if you are if you are traveling on an expired visa, you want to make sure you have your passport with you, of course, to have that. And conversely, if you have a passport that is expired, you want to make sure that you're traveling with both documents, your visa, which has your old passport with it, and your new passport that will be in a separate book that you would receive. So make sure you are traveling with both documentations. If you're traveling, as an example, after you arrive in the US, you want to leave again and come back, and your passport is being renewed in that situation. Okay, so going from there, preparing to come to the US, what should be on your mind after all the processes have been done and have been captured? Number one, we always, always, always stress that we would recommend you to check your email daily to make sure that you're getting information from our office, from any office, and Northeastern specifically, actually, to make sure you know what's happening and know how to move forward with that information in mind. We at OGS send information through this automated box here that we recommend you add to your approved senders list so that you can see exactly anything that's coming from our office to make sure it's not going through spam or anything that may be unread in that situation. Likewise, you will get instructions specifically about how to enter the country and how to go through a process called immigration clearance, ultimately speaking, activating your F1 status for your program here after you arrive prior to your arrival. This will happen about a month prior, so in August or so, you'll get this email from our office stating what to expect and what to do to activate your F1 status. So keep that in mind. That will happen through email. So check that out when you do receive that application. It will be something only sent through email as well too. If you don't receive that email, maybe by mid-August, come talk to us and we'll let you know exactly what's going on and how to access that documentation for activating your F1 status. And speaking of orientation, this really is to capture everything in terms of what your expectations are for being a student on an F1 status, being a student on F1 status with Northeastern, and how we report and capture information. So this is really a benefit to you to make sure that it's really capturing that ease of transition of knowing what you can do, what you shouldn't be doing, to make sure that things are as clear as possible, because it can be daunting, of course, to enter a new country on a new status and not really understanding what the rules or what the expectations are. And trying to have that on top of your studies is a lot. We understand that. So we want to make sure that you have the support from our office to move forward and to know clearly what you cannot, and should not be doing while you're here during that time. And when timelines are activated for future benefits, such as maybe employment that you may be thinking about down the line. I mentioned about the email timeline in terms of August, so keep that in mind. That's when you will be receiving it. And it'll be going to your Northeastern account specifically. So your personal email is not really something that we will be using much beyond the initial stages. But once you have your activation of your account through Northeastern, we'll be using that record specifically for all communications. So make sure you're checking that email specifically to get stuff from our office. Okay, so with that, we're kind of wrapping up our presentation here. I want to make sure we have some time for questions, of course, if there are any other lingering questions, but how to contact us, we have a few ways to have that done. Number one, we do have our main line here, which is 617-373-2310. This is kind of the first location if you want to contact the office specifically and speak to someone in real time. Please note that folks who are answering the phones are not immigration advisors. So it's something that you can get assistance for general information about the office and about things on our website for clarification. But any kind of immigration advising will have to go into a deeper conversation in other platforms. We'll talk about that in a second. Number two, of course, our website. You want to check out our website to make sure you can find anything available to your status. Since you'll be here for quite some time, we definitely want to recommend you looking around on the website and seeing what is available. There's many things about your timeline for your program now, your future benefits you may be looking forward to in the future. If you're looking forward to things like co-op or internships after you finish your program here, these are all factors that we have highlighted in great detail on the website. So please make sure you're checking that out for any questions you may have in terms of that information. And lastly, we have our service portal, which is kind of a self-service portal where we highly recommend you are using in terms of finding information on a clearly searchable basis. If you want to find information that is tied to a specific question, you can type in your question in this portal and it'll bring you to a knowledge article tied to your answer. If you can't find an answer, we actually have a section where you can submit something called an inquiry form, ultimately stating, I can't find an answer to my question, and you can detail your information there directly in terms of who you are, what you're asking about, and how we can assist you with that information. All that's through the inquiry form directly. So we recommend you submit those there if you have any doubts or concerns about things that we've mentioned or haven't mentioned even, to get talks with us in that way. But with that, that is the end of the formal presentation that we have for this conversation today. We definitely want to leave time if there are any other lingering questions to make sure we can address them in any format to make sure that we can handle what's going on. So I'm going to take a quick second to look at anything in the chat here to make sure I'm not missing anything. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and we'll check and see what else is going on for anything. But anyone who's answering questions, if there's anything that I am missing, please let me know.
No, I mean, I think that most folks have gotten their questions answered in the chat. Looks like there's a couple more that are just trickling in. So we can hang out and answer those.
Fantastic. Yes, let me look at this information. I will stop sharing my screen. Now we'll see what we have here. Yeah, looks like there were definitely a lot of questions that were submitted. So thank you for your questions for our session. Many questions have been or currently are being answered right now. So we definitely thank you for your active attendance into what's happening right now for preparing for entering into the US, preparing for what's happening next, and really getting ready for the next stage in your academic career. We're happy to kind of answer any questions that may come up, of course, later. If you want to contact us through the inquiry form, as I mentioned earlier, or through other sessions that we're going to have for the webinars, we'll definitely be having other information and platforms for that to make sure you have ways to get information from us, from our office, or from other offices to make sure you're very and confidently available to move forward with this process. But I'm going to keep looking at the chat here and see if anything else is needing to be addressed. But also, I'm also cognizant of your time. I want to make sure if you have time to end early based off of if everything is answered, we will definitely do so. So I'll give it a couple more to make sure we're not missing anything here. Yeah, just a couple of things I do want to highlight. In terms of, I guess, specific questions related to your specific case, something that may need more discussion on. So if you do have a deeper question that may be tied to your specific situation in terms of what your plans are, in terms of what your considerations are, in terms of where you're from, in terms of your current status now, something that we would definitely want to speak more on a larger forum that we can talk deeper on, either through email or through appointments. We can talk that way as well. But some questions may not be best suited because of the format we are in right now for a deeper kind of question. So just keep that in mind if some of these questions are a little more in depth. There's a few questions here in terms of the fee payment. In terms of CVIS fee payments and DS-160 fee payments directly, these would have to be paid if they were not paid previously. So if you are a new student, you would have to pay these fees. But if you are already a transfer student who has already paid these fees and transferring your record over to Northeastern, these fees do not need to be repaid. In terms of applying for the I-20 itself, we recommend you follow our guide on the application status check portal. There is a page there called the OGS Welcome, where you can see exactly how to access the I-20 directly for the application itself. And one last question here in terms of future considerations, in terms of thinking about planning for your second half of your time in London, and you're thinking about applying for your I-20, it is possible to apply for an I-20 early. However, we recommend that you are focusing on the London part, if that was the case. But in this situation here, it is perfectly fine to apply for an I-20 as early as possible, so you can have that documentation ready and good to go and clarified and cleared up, so that you can focus on stage 2. Something that we'll talk about, of course, deeper as you are in your program. We'll have more talks about that later in the summer as well as in the fall to prepare you for the London component of your program. But as of now, our emphasis is to make sure you're focusing on the first imminent step, which would be tied to applying for your F1 for studying in the US. And one last question that came in terms of I-20s and visas, you would need to have your I-20 captured for each program that you're in. So you would need to apply, of course, for the first I-20 that you're doing now for Global Scholars, and you would have a timeline later to apply for a different I-20 after you complete your Global Scholars program for your bachelor's program. But the visa itself, as I mentioned earlier, is consistent with your CVIS record. So you don't need to apply for a new visa when you are transitioning programs. Your visa will be valid as long as it continues onward for your timing. So as long as you are having a visa that is still valid and you haven't left the country during that timeline, you're able to use that visa continuously for multiple timelines, including your Global Scholars and your bachelor's program itself. Okay, one last question that came in right now in terms of the second stage of your program in terms of London is something that will be covered in more detail later. You will get coverage from us in later in the summer, as well as in the fall for more details about what that looks like and how that process will go. So as of right now, we're not talking about that today in our session. We're talking clearly about only the F1 component of that, but you'll get more information about that as time gets closer to apply for that after completing the first step in your F1 process. So keep in mind, you can hear from us soon. Don't worry. Okay, with that, I am not seeing any other questions here. If anything else if you have any other doubts about what's going on, please contact us for sure. We're happy to answer anything you have on a more individual basis about what's going on, about your case specifically, what you're thinking about long term. We're happy to talk to you and figure all these things out. Don't worry about that whatsoever. And of course, for our webinar session today, we will send out the slides to you if we can research that on your own for more details and for the links that are provided into the slides. But we definitely want to thank you all for your time and your presence here today. It's very important to make sure that we advocate for you and your success as you come forward to this program. So I want to just say thank you all once more, I should say, for your time, and we'll be in contact with you very, very soon.
Thank you so much, Discard, for sharing this very helpful information. And I look forward to seeing you in Oakland for sure. All right. Hope everyone has a good rest of their day. Bye, all.